Right, Charles, the last of the big strategies that we're going to look at is the New Growth Path, or the NGP. This was introduced in 2010. So the previous one, obviously, New Growth Path would have replaced ASGISA. ASGISA was introduced in 2006, obviously replaced 4 years later with the New Growth Path. The problem with these strategies are as soon as the government realizes that they will not reach their objectives, then instead of making the strategy work, they just replace the strategy. Okay, so the focus areas or the aims, the goals of the NGP was to enhance growth, again, create economic growth, sustainable economic growth, create employment, and then create greater equality. So the same goals as all the other strategies, but specific target, obviously, for ASGISA was to halve unemployment and poverty. For the NGP, the target was to create 5 million jobs over 10 years. So between 2010 and 2020, they wanted to create 5 million jobs. It's more attainable than to halve unemployment, but yeah, it also didn't work. All right, so to achieve this, they realized that the economy needs to grow at an accelerated pace. Okay, remember I said that economic growth rate of at least 5% is needed to create significant drops in unemployment. For the New Growth Path, they pushed that up to 6%. In order to create 5 million jobs, they needed an economic growth rate basically of 6%. Okay, so they focused on the microeconomic approach as well as the microeconomic approach. In terms of macroeconomic approach, monetary policy interventions, that needs to be less strict. So in other words, more expansionary monetary policy, a more competitive exchange rate, and lower costs of capital. Okay, competitive exchange rate, all the strategies before this one, from GEAR to ASGISA to the NGP now, speaks about competitive exchange rates, which means a slightly depreciated rand. If the rand is too strong, it makes our exports too expensive. Other countries will not buy from us. We need to increase our exports, and we do that by keeping our rand at a slightly depreciated value. Lower costs of capital means a lower interest rate. Interest rate is what we pay for capital. So they want a lower interest rate to make it more affordable for businesses to obtain loans so that they can expand their businesses. And then lastly, a more restrained fiscal policy and a reprioritizing of public spending. Again, restructuring of the budget, not spending on unnecessary things, decreasing unauthorized spending. So government spending needs to be more restrained. They need to look at where they are spending that money. They need to reprioritize. They need to spend the money on things that is going to create economic growth. They need to spend the money on things that is going to redistribute income. They need to focus on the people of the country. That tax money must be used to benefit the people of the country and not politicians. In terms of the microeconomic approach, it involves 10 programs. We're going to look at what those 10 programs are now, but it's aimed at, first of all, controlling inflation, to limit inefficiencies, and to create an inclusive economy. That's the aims of these 10 microeconomic programs. So in order to control inflation, they want to encourage competition. We have the competition policy. The competition policy's aim is to encourage competition, to make the markets more efficient, okay, to supervise monopoly pricing. I've said before that Eskom, for example, which is a monopoly, the increases that have been granted is consistently higher than inflation. So if we need to keep inflation between 3 and 6%, monopolies should also only increase their prices between 3 and 6% and not 12 or 18 or 25%. So we need to supervise, the competition authorities need to supervise monopoly pricing more closely, and they need to make sure that competition is functioning on the markets. Then there should be a review of administered prices to ensure that they do not increase above inflation. Okay, just quickly, we haven't done inflation yet, but administered prices are prices basically that is determined by the government. The government decides on the price. Administered prices will include, for example, the fuel price, because the government determines that. Interest rates are administered prices. Any prices that is determined by the government. And consistently, over the last couple of years, administered prices consistently increase at higher than inflation rates. and that should not happen. It should not increase above inflation. So the fuel price should not increase by more than 6%. Interest rates should not go up by more than 6%. Any price is set by the government. It shouldn't increase by more than 6%, which it does. All right, and then there should be interventions in the case of rapidly rising prices of essential products. All right, so those things that are essential for people to stay alive, basic food, for example, the government should intervene if the prices of essential goods rise too rapidly. They should intervention. Remember, part of that intervention could be maximum prices potentially. All right, they need to limit inefficiencies in the market through encouraging competition, through deregulation. We've discussed all these strategies under the supply side measures. And then by creating an inclusive economy, social equity, and regional development. Okay, inclusive economy means everybody has equal access. Everybody has equal access to opportunities, whether it's educational opportunities, job opportunities, promotional opportunities. There should basically not be any discrimination in terms of that. And then regional development, we're going to focus in that in chapter 10. But basically, there's an unequal distribution of economic activities throughout the country, where some regions are far more developed than others. And we need to create a more equal regional development so that people across the country can have equal opportunities there where they are. The 10 programs, 10 microeconomic programs, first of all, will include an industrial policy, okay, which we are going to look at in detail in the next chapter. These are measured aimed at the development of certain kinds of activities in the economy. Remember, industrial development means that there's an increase in industries. Now we are opening more businesses, new business establishment, businesses expanding. Okay, so we want to focus the attention on certain kinds of activities. You'll see there's certain focus areas that we want to measure. We give advantages to certain activities because those are the activities that we want to stimulate. Then the rural development policy, as I said, to decrease the inequalities between the different regions and improve the standards of living of people living in the rural areas, because they are at a disadvantage in terms of living standards and access to education and access to healthcare facilities, etc., etc. And the problem is with this unequal distribution of economic activities is that people move away from the rural areas into the urban areas because there are more opportunities for them there. And this places a lot of pressure on our urban areas in terms of infrastructure. There's not enough schools, not enough hospitals. The roads get congested. All the people cannot find a job. They revert to crime, so crime rates increase. All right, so we want to create jobs for people in the rural area so that they don't have to move to the urban areas to try and come and find a job. Then in terms of competition policy, more measures should be put in place, obviously, to encourage healthy competition in all sectors. Make sure that competition is working, identify impediments that prevents competition from working, remove those impediments, make sure there's no anti-competitive behavior. We do have a competition policy. We have competition commission, the tribunal, the appeals court to deal with any issues there. Okay, then education and skills development. You'll remember this is a focus area throughout all of these strategies, because investment in our human resources is an investment into the future, right? We know that we have shortages of skilled people, oversupply of unskilled people. So we need to create an education system, a training system that can correct the shortage of technically skilled manpower. We have a serious shortage of technical skills. So the whole education system must correct these shortages. We need people to become skilled in technologically advanced skills. So obviously we need to educate them. We need to provide the skills in facilities so that people can become technically more skilled. In terms of enterprise development, I said before, it is all about promoting the SMMEs. All right, we need to encourage the establishment of smaller businesses, and we want to encourage entrepreneurship, eliminate unnecessary red tape, the bureaucratic process that we've spoken about before, make it easier for people to start businesses. Deregulation, remove unnecessary regulations that is inhibiting businesses from opening, encourage entrepreneurship by providing financing, give small businesses tax advantages, anything that we need to do to encourage them. Then broad-based Black economic empowerment, we've spoken about this before, encouraging measures like ownership and directorship, ownership, shareholding of previously disadvantaged people, So we want to increase ownership by communities and workers. We want to increase people's skills. We want to encourage people to support small businesses. And then we've spoken about the procurement before. Okay, when the government does procurement, they should do it from local producers, from smaller businesses, support employment creation in labor-intensive industries, and then do wealth creation on a broad basis. Now, remember, Triple BE is all about meaningful participation. We want to increase the ownership of previously disadvantaged people, encourage them to own their own businesses, to manage businesses, directorships, meaningful participation. Right, and then in terms of labor policies, obviously when there's rapid economic growth, there also needs to be rapid changes in the labor market, which sometimes can create uncertainty for workers. And obviously, as part of to decrease the negative effects on workers in terms of Basic Conditions of Employment Act, we've got the Labor Relations Act, we have Skills Development Act, we've got lots of acts that relates to labor policy specifically. All right, so we have obviously Basic Conditions of Employment Act prescribes minimum conditions for employment to make sure that workers are treated fairly at work, that they are earning a living wage in terms of the minimum basic, the basic minimum wage. Unemployment insurance fund, where employers are compelled to register their workers for unemployment, to make the contributions, so that if workers should lose their jobs, then at least they have that safety net to fall on. They can claim from the unemployment insurance fund until they can find another job. All right, so it decreases the negative effects on the workers. Remember, in a work situation, your employer is in a much more powerful position than the employee. Now, the employee would like to keep his job. So sometimes employers really exploit the workers, and there's lots of labor policies and labor laws that have been accepted into law to prevent that from happening. Then there's also a technology policy. We do realize that we have to increase our research and development. We want to stimulate research and development. You'll see we're going to talk about the NSDS. This is specifically what that is about, because we cannot move forward, we cannot innovate if there's no research. All right, obviously businesses are reluctant to pay for research because it's expensive. It's a very huge expense for them, and the research doesn't always come up immediately with innovative new products. But we do realize that if we want to move ahead, if we want to be competitive internationally, we do need to do more research. We need to improve what we are doing, all right? Increase the usage of ICT, information and communication technology, computer technology. It is the future, all right? If you just see how certain industries have changed as a result of the COVID-19, even the way that we teach have changed slightly. If you look at what we can do now in terms of the videos that I can teach you when I'm not even there in your house. All right, so we need to adapt technologies in industries to create more employment. Obviously, yes, we realize that technology is important and we need to implement new technology because technology, the relevant technology, obviously increases productivity. We are able to produce more stuff if we do go capital intensive, but we also need to remember that we do have an oversupply of unskilled workers, and when technology replaces labor, inevitably it replaces unskilled labor, which potentially can make the problem of oversupply even worse. So we just have to adapt these technologies so that it can go hand in hand with job creation as well. We need to just be careful in terms of the technology that we do implement so that we do not create extra unemployment. All right, and we do need to maintain our technological edge in knowledge-intensive industry. Obviously, we live in the age of technology where technology changes very quickly and information is power. So having knowledge-intensive sectors, in those sectors where we have an advantage, we need to stay ahead of the game by doing our research and knowing, preempting any changes that might happen. Right, second last program is to develop trade policies. Again, this is to maximize the benefits of international trade. Remember, our trade policy consists of import substitution as well as export promotion. So what we need to do is we need to identify opportunities for exports in external international markets, identify where a potential export market exists, and then we use trade agreements to take advantage of these opportunities. All right, if we can establish a free trade area or a common market with other countries that can serve as an export market, it gives us kind of a guarantee that we can export our goods to these markets without any fear of protectionism. They are not going to add taxes to our goods over there. They're not going to impose quotas at us over there because we have a trade agreement. So it's very important that we focus on export promotion, export services injection. Once again, money coming into the country, obviously we can use to benefit our own country, to expand our industries, to create jobs for local people and grow our own economy. All right, so we need to increase our exports, and one way of doing that is to identify opportunities in external markets. Where are the countries that we can export our goods to? And once we have identified them, it's up to the government to enter into trade agreements so that we can take advantage of these opportunities. And then lastly, we need to also develop policies for African development. Okay, South Africa in Southern Africa is the driving force behind the development of specifically infrastructure. We are the most advanced, technologically advanced country in Southern Africa, and we almost have a duty to assist in the development of our surrounding countries as well. All right, so we need to do what we need to do, obviously through different trade agreements that we have with them as well. We share our infrastructure, we import through our harbors, we transport it up to them. All right, so we need to also assist with the African development. The reason for this is if other Southern African countries can grow and develop, and people there can find jobs and they've got income to spend, that is a potential market for us, an export market that we can then capitalize on, but only if those people have money to buy the stuff from us. All right, so if we assist with their development, potentially somewhere in the future, it is a potential market for us. Okay, so now the key areas that they've identified where they would like to create these jobs. Now they want to create 5 million jobs over the next or over 10 years. Which areas are they thinking of to stimulate so that it can create jobs in those areas? Again, infrastructure expansion. RDP, GEAR, ASGISA, NGP, all of them has infrastructure as a focus area. So please, if you have to study, if you guess infrastructure, it would be a good guess. All right. 5 key areas in terms of infrastructure is energy or electricity, transport, communications, the water provision, and then housing, which is the only one. The other ones are all economic infrastructure. Housing is social infrastructure. The second focus area is the agricultural value chain. Okay, what we need to realize also is that agriculture, although South Africa is not known as an agricultural country, and we have very much challenges that faces agriculture on a daily basis. Things like the high cost of fertilizer, other inputs. There's minimum wages obviously imposed on agriculture. So they do face a lot of challenges in terms of their production cost. And then you must remember agriculture is a very difficult industry to be involved in because the farmers can literally do everything right, plant at the right time, fertilize the soil, do whatever they need to do. But if it doesn't rain, their stuff isn't going to grow. And then they've invested a whole lot of money into inputs and they're never going to get any harvest or output. So it's very much challenging, all right? But the idea is that we make it as easy as possible for them. If we can reduce the cost of their inputs, obviously decrease their production costs, their supply of raw materials can increase. But the focus specifically is on promoting the processing and export marketing. All right, we need to capitalize on the export market. There's quite a few agricultural products that we actually export, but the thing is we should process before we export. If we export unprocessed raw materials, we do not earn a lot of foreign currency like that. It is better to process here and then export a more finished product. Okay, for example, we're not going to export the grapes. We are going to turn the grapes into wine first. We export the wine. We're not going to export maize. We process the maize into milli meal. We export the milli meal. They process before we export. Same thing with the mining value chain. First of all, we need to increase mining extraction. So we need to take out more minerals. Obviously, minerals is not renewable resources. So we can only extract what we do have. We cannot make more. All right, but we should extract what we have, improve the infrastructure and skills development in the mining value chain, and then again, process minerals into higher value products locally rather than exporting it as a commodity, an unprocessed commodity to be processed abroad. So when we take out the gold, for example, we're not going to export the gold. We turn the gold into jewelry. We export the jewelry. Now we add value added services. All right, before we just export raw materials, then we do not earn a lot of income like that. If we process first and we export a processed product, we do earn more foreign exchange like that, so the injection is bigger. Okay, then the green economy. If you think back to as GISA, one of the focus areas was biofuels. Biofuel is fuel that is environmentally more friendly, okay, as opposed to fossil fuels, which is the coal and the oil and the stuff that we burn. So in terms of the green economy, we need to focus more on environmentally friendly production processes. So we need to focus on the construction and production of technology for solar energy. We should be encouraging people to switch over to solar, to not use Eskom power so much anymore, because Eskom obviously burns coal. The more electricity we use, the more coal they need to burn, and burning of coal creates the most pollution like in the world. All right, fossil fuel. The burning of fossil fuels creates a lot of pollution, so it's not environmentally very friendly, whereby solar energy is 100% environmentally friendly. Okay. Same with wind energy, okay? Obviously in areas where the wind blows very often, like in PE, I mentioned in class at some stage, there's a whole wind farm in, I think it's PE or East London, where there's a whole lot of wind turbines that just needs to be switched on, right? So we can create electricity from the wind, transferring that energy into normal energy that people can use. And then obviously the biofuel is, for example, when they create fuel, like create petrol and stuff without using oil and coal. If they use like environmentally friendly things like plant stuff and whatever that they burn to create a fuel. Okay, then the manufacturing sector, you will see in the next chapter, we're going to look at the IMS. Okay, so the focus here is on innovation. We need to come up with new things, different ways of doing things. We need to improve what we do. Obviously, skills development in the manufacturing sector is very important, because in manufacturing, that is one of the industries where technology can be used to our advantage. But obviously, we can only implement technology if our workers know how to operate the technology. So the implementation of technology, you need to go hand in hand with skills development. Okay, reduced input costs, in other words, reduced production costs. From the government side, they need to do what they need to do to reduce the production cost of businesses, encourage competition, deregulation, decrease the cost of infrastructure. We've discussed lots of that. And then increase in research and development investment. So obviously we can only innovate, we can only come up with new production methods, new products that is changing people's lives, making people's lives easier. That only comes through research. Now, you cannot come up with something new unless you do the research. And research obviously is expensive. So from the government side, they can also fund research for businesses. All right, and then the last focus area is tourism. Obviously, again, because tourism is labor intensive, and tourism is the fastest growing industry in South Africa and in the world. And in South Africa, obviously, we've got a lot of potential for tourism. All right. So again, if you have to guess for focus areas, now across the different strategies, guess focus areas, infrastructure is always a good guess, and tourism is always a good guess.